that Mr. Martin is not your son's biological father because your ex-boyfriend, Mr. Richardson, is. Today's DNA test will allow you to get rid of Mr. Martin and to finally reconcile your relationship with Mr. Richardson. The baby from you in hopes that she could build a family with Mr. Richardson and not you. Prove you are the biological father.
Yes, Sean.
First of all, Logan looks just like Anthony. They have the same ears, eyes, nose, and he don't favor Mr. Martin at all.
See, I didn't have it as many times she said I did, but I know it's a fact. It was 3 at her apartment, 2 at her family member house, 1 at my house, and 1 in the car.
You say this is your child, Mr. Martin?
Yes, Your Honor.
At
yes,
first.
Yes.
How did she lead you to believe that?
Because she called me and said she was pregnant.
So you're saying she called you to tell you I'm pregnant and you're the father at first?
Yes, at first.
Did you call him and say I'm pregnant and you're the father?
First of all, I called both of them because
when the truth walks into the courtroom, it doesn't whisper, it explodes. Under the sharp gaze of Judge Lauren Lake, the DNA test that everyone thought would bring closure instead ignites a storm of regret, revelation, and raw emotion. Because in this courtroom, where law meets love and truth changes everything, there's no script, only evidence, heartbreak, and the unfiltered pursuit of justice. In the world of family law, every case carries a heartbeat, every file a story, and every DNA test a potential breaking point. Judge Lauren Lake has seen the spectrum of human emotion unfold in her courtroom, from desperate hope to soul-deep regret. This double episode, more than any other, is a masterclass in how truth, once revealed, cannot be undone. It's not just about biology, it's about betrayal, identity, and the uneasy relationship between law and justice. What begins as a mother's attempt to get the other man out of her life becomes a study in human vulnerability. On the surface, it looks like a simple paternity dispute. A young woman torn between 2 men, one claiming the right to be a father and another fighting for love he believes is real. But as the DNA evidence inches closer to exposure, the courtroom becomes a theater of raw honesty. Judge Lauren Lake, both compassionate and commanding, knows that truth doesn't always heal. It often destroys before it rebuilds. Each time a test result is read aloud, she carries the weight of what that paper represents. Not just science, but shattered illusions. And yet, this is precisely what makes her courtroom a space where the concept of justice in jurisprudence comes alive. Not in cold statutes, but in human tears and trembling voices. In this episode, the DNA test isn't just a test, it's a mirror, a reflection of choices made in moments of weakness, of words unspoken, and of lives entangled in lies and longing. For the people standing before Judge Lake, the truth is no longer a mystery, it's a verdict waiting to happen. But what makes this story unforgettable is how that verdict reshapes everything they thought they knew about themselves. Across countless DNA test cheating stories, people often believe that clarity will set them free. Yet as the Game-Changing Attorney podcast once explored, the courtroom is not only about justice, it's about strategy, timing, and emotional truth. Here too, each party stands on the stage like an actor in a tragedy of their own making, hoping that the law will validate their version of events. Judge Lauren Lake watches as evidence unfolds, each word, each testimony weighed like a fragment of a broken puzzle. There's a reason this courtroom has become the pulse of modern legal storytelling. It's not simply the drama. It's the courage it takes for people to expose their secrets under oath. The courtroom, after all, is a sacred space where truth is excavated, not manufactured. And when the DNA test arrives, it's no longer about who slept with whom. It's about who lied, who loved, and who lost. The test becomes the silent witness, the one piece of evidence immune to manipulation. It doesn't care about regret or reconciliation. It speaks in probabilities and percentages, stripping away the emotion to reveal what's undeniably real. This is why so many people regret taking a DNA test. Because while science gives answers, it also takes away illusions. It doesn't just end relationships, it redefines them. For Judge Lauren Lake, each case is a reminder that while truth changes everything, it doesn't necessarily bring peace. Sometimes, it's the beginning of a new kind of pain, the kind that forces people to grow. What makes this double episode powerful is not just the revelations, but the aftermath. The mother who thought she could choose love over biology must face the moral mathematics of her decisions. The man who believed he was the real father learns how fragile belief can be when tested by DNA. And the man she wanted out of her life becomes the very person the law says must stay. It's a paradox that exposes the thin line between love and justice, between human desire and divine design. This is not just another stage in a divorce case or a family dispute. It's a living dissertation on how the relationship between law and justice evolves in real time, where emotion meets logic, where compassion meets accountability. And it's in those intersections that Judge Lauren Lake shines, not just as an arbiter of law, but as a custodian of human truth. Throughout the hearing, echoes of real-life experiences resurface, moments that mirror celebrate recovery testimonies, where people face their past with brutal honesty. Each confession becomes a step toward redemption, even if it comes with heartbreak. The mother's tears, the father's silence, the child's name on a birth certificate, all are threads in the tapestry of accountability. Yet beneath it all lies a universal truth. DNA doesn't just expose infidelity, it exposes humanity. In every DNA test cheating story, there's an unspoken question. What is love worth when proof says otherwise? And in this case, Judge Lauren Lake reminds everyone that love without truth is just performance. It may survive for a season, but under the light of evidence, it always collapses. When the DNA results are finally read, the silence in the courtroom becomes heavier than words. This is the moment where science and soul collide. For the man who hoped to be the father, it's the death of a dream. For the man she tried to erase, it's vindication wrapped in disbelief. And for the mother at the center, it's both punishment and mercy, proof that truth, however painful, is always necessary. In the broader lens of jurisprudence, Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom becomes a microcosm of the Supreme Court of Emotion, a place where evidence is sacred and stories are human. The Adverse Inference in Evidence Act quietly lingers in principle, reminding us that when someone hides the truth, the law assumes guilt, and in these emotional trials, concealment often speaks louder than confession. The courtroom dynamic also touches on themes often explored in the Divorce Course podcast, where experts and survivors discuss the anatomy of heartbreak through legal perspective. The intersection of love, deception, and legal responsibility transforms the private agony of individuals into public education for millions watching. Because these aren't just television moments, they're modern case studies in accountability. By the time Judge Lauren Lake delivers her ruling, she's not merely interpreting law, she's orchestrating healing. Her tone softens, her words deliberate. She understands that in family law, victory rarely feels like winning. The man declared, "Father," must now face the responsibility that comes with biology, child support, emotional presence, and moral duty. The man excluded by DNA must mourn not just the child, but the future he imagined. This is what makes paternity court so much more than entertainment. It's a lesson in human consequence. Like the adoption story's full episodes where identity is rediscovered, every DNA case rewrites someone's story of belonging. The truth becomes the compass, pointing away from fantasy and toward fact. And in that journey, Judge Lauren Lake remains both guide and guardian. Her courtroom doesn't thrive on spectacle. It thrives on truth. She embodies a rare form of jurisprudence, empathetic yet unyielding, emotional yet fiercely rational. For her, every ruling is a sermon about accountability, every piece of evidence a moral scripture. The power of her words lies not in authority, but in understanding. She knows that while laws are written in ink, justice is written in tears. Through the lens of the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, one could even argue that Judge Lake transforms the courtroom into a form of restorative justice, where emotional wounds are treated through exposure not concealment. The litigants leave her courtroom changed, not just by law, but by truth's cleansing fire. Because in the end, truth changes everything: relationships, reputations, realities. It tears apart the illusions people build to protect themselves. Yet somehow, it also plants the seeds of redemption. That's why even in the pain of revelation, there's grace. The same grace echoed in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where people discover that healing doesn't begin with denial. It begins with confession. This double episode reminds us that family, law, and love are not separate worlds. They're parts of the same fragile equation. When one lies, all three collapse. But when one tells the truth, all three can heal. Judge Lauren Lake understands this balance deeply, how the scales of justice must sometimes tilt toward compassion, but never away from truth. In a world obsessed with control, the DNA test becomes a symbol of surrender. It's proof that some answers don't come from persuasion, but from science. And while that certainty may sting, it also liberates. Because knowing, even painfully, is always better than pretending. Truth has a way of stripping away everything unnecessary: ego, illusion, and even the comfort of denial. In Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, every confession is a form of evidence, every tear a statement under oath. By the time the DNA results settle into the silence, the people before her aren't just litigants, they're witnesses to their own humanity. The mother at the center of this case believed the DNA test would give her control, a way to close one chapter and open another. What she didn't expect was how the truth would refuse to stay where she wanted it. When she hears that the man she tried to erase is, in fact, the biological father, her expression captures what so many people regret taking a DNA test for. Not because they didn't want truth, but because they weren't ready for what the truth demanded. Judge Lauren Lake's presence becomes both a mirror and a compass. She doesn't simply announce the results, she dissects them. Her courtroom is a blend of therapy and theology, law and life. She reminds everyone that while DNA might establish paternity, it cannot define love. The relationship between law and justice is complex. Law tells us what's right by rule. Justice tells us what's right by heart. When those two meet in her courtroom, the air becomes thick with reckoning. In a modern society where truth is often twisted for convenience, this case stands as a moral documentary. It echoes the themes often explored on the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where experts discuss how ethical boundaries define real advocacy. In paternity disputes, ethics are emotional battlegrounds. What one hides, another pays for. Every decision made in passion becomes an exhibit in court. And then there's the deeper layer, the adverse inference in evidence act, the silent rule that punishes concealment. When a mother hides the possibility of another father, the law interprets that silence as guilt. But Judge Lauren Lake knows that behind every lie is usually fear, the fear of loss, shame, or rejection. She doesn't condone deceit, but she understands its anatomy. The courtroom becomes a sanctuary of truth and consequence. Evidence isn't just documents, it's behavior, tone, memory, and contradiction. When Judge Lake questions someone, it's not to trap them, it's to free them from the weight of half-truths. And that's where her brilliance lies. She knows that the truth isn't just discovered, it's extracted, layer by layer, confession by confession. This story, like so many DNA test cheating stories, exposes the fragile human desire to rewrite destiny. The mother's motives were not evil, they were emotional. She wanted love, stability, redemption. But the DNA test doesn't honor emotion, it honors fact. When science enters the equation, the emotional calculus collapses. The moment the words, "You are the father," leave Judge Lauren Lake's lips, the emotional temperature shifts. The man once dismissed as irrelevant suddenly becomes central. His joy, raw and unfiltered, collides with the mother's disbelief. And in that collision lies the lesson. Truth changes everything, not just relationships, but reputations, responsibilities, and realities. From a legal perspective, this case underscores the concept of justice in jurisprudence, how moral truth and legal truth sometimes intersect and sometimes collide. The law sees paternity as obligation. The heart sees it as connection. But when the DNA says otherwise, both are forced to reconcile. Judge Lake's ruling becomes more than a verdict. It's a moral declaration that truth, no matter how painful, must be honored. In her closing words, she doesn't just congratulate the man confirmed as the father. She cautions him. Biology gives you a child, she reminds him, but love makes you a parent. It's a simple statement, yet it encapsulates centuries of legal philosophy about parenthood and duty. It also reflects the Supreme Court's evolving understanding of family law, that justice must serve not only logic, but also humanity. The other man, the one who believed the child was his, sits in disbelief. He has built months of fatherhood, memories, expectations, and love, on a foundation that has just been declared invalid. For him, the truth changes everything in a devastating way. His eyes, filled with disbelief, mirror the stories told in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals face life's most painful reckonings and still find grace on the other side. Judge Lauren Lake sees that pain. She knows that losing the role of a father isn't just a legal loss, it's a personal bereavement. In that moment, she doesn't speak as a judge, but as a healer. Her empathy doesn't weaken the law, it strengthens it. Because the heart of justice is not punishment, it's understanding. Outside her courtroom, this case resonates across the digital world. On the Divorce Course podcast, experts discuss how such moments highlight the invisible wounds of love gone wrong, the emotional evidence that courts can't document. They explore how individuals, like the ones before Judge Lake, must learn to rebuild after the verdict. Because while law can end a case, it cannot end the ache that truth leaves behind. In this story, the DNA test functions as both sword and salvation. It cuts through deception, but it also redeems the innocent. It destroys false narratives while rescuing truth from the shadows. But in doing so, it leaves scars. These scars are not punishments. They are reminders that choices carry consequences, and that justice, when done right, is always bittersweet. Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom reflects a living theology of accountability. Every ruling she makes is shaped by the belief that truth without compassion becomes cruelty, and compassion without truth becomes chaos. She balances both with the precision of a surgeon. She understands that the courtroom is not just a stage for verdicts. It's a place of emotional surgery, where wounds must be opened before they can heal. In one quiet moment after the ruling, as the courtroom begins to settle, Judge Lake reminds the parties that the truth will always outlive the lie. Her words echo like scripture. They speak to anyone who has ever tried to hide from consequence, anyone who has ever believed that silence could protect them. In the end, silence is just a pause before revelation. This double episode, she wants to get the other man out of her life, will likely become one of those adoption stories full episodes that people revisit. Not because of the drama, but because of the humanity. It's a story of misdirection, love, betrayal, and ultimately, restoration. It reminds viewers that even when people manipulate situations, the truth changes everything in its own time. And somewhere within all this legal and emotional chaos lies a deeper commentary on modern relationships. Infidelity is not just a moral failing. It's a legal ripple that affects children, partners, and even extended families. When the DNA test comes into play, what was once private becomes public. What was once emotional becomes legal. This transition from love to litigation is one of the most fascinating evolutions in human society. Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom captures this evolution perfectly. It's where emotion meets evidence, where private pain becomes public record, and where truth becomes the final arbiter. Even the Supreme Court, in its rulings on family and child support, has acknowledged that modern justice must account for emotional reality. The law can enforce responsibility, but only compassion can restore relationships. And that is what Judge Lake embodies. A rare equilibrium between intellect and empathy. For viewers, this episode also serves as a moral compass. It forces reflection. How much truth can love survive? How many lies can justice forgive? And at what point does self-protection become self-destruction? These questions ripple far beyond the courtroom. They enter the territory of human recovery, the space where law and soul meet. Just as those in Celebrate Recovery testimonies confess to their brokenness in order to heal, the people in Judge Lake's courtroom confront their truth to rebuild. Their pain becomes their purification. And yet the story isn't only about pain, it's about redemption. The man who fought for the truth finally receives acknowledgement, not just from the court, but from life itself. His persistence becomes a form of justice. He represents every parent who refused to give up, every person who believed that evidence would vindicate them. The woman, though exposed, is not condemned. Judge Lauren Lake's wisdom ensures that she is held accountable without being destroyed. That's the difference between punishment and justice. One seeks revenge, the other seeks restoration. This distinction is at the heart of the relationship between law and justice, a theme that gives the courtroom its moral gravity. Outside the courthouse, the episode's echoes continue. Podcasters, analysts, and law students dissect its implications. On the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, discussions about moral leadership find new life in Judge Lake's decisions. On the Divorce Course podcast, therapists analyze how truth-telling in relationships parallels legal honesty in court. Across digital platforms, this case becomes a case study in truth's power to both heal and hurt. Through it all, Judge Lauren Lake remains unwavering. She doesn't dramatize justice, she delivers it with clarity and compassion. Her words aren't just rulings, they're reminders. She knows that the courtroom isn't where families end, it's where they begin to rebuild on the right foundation. Truth. By the end of this emotional odyssey, no one leaves unchanged. The mother learns that manipulation cannot rewrite reality. The biological father learns that victory comes with responsibility. And the man who lost his presumed paternity learns that even pain can teach dignity. In that way, the episode transcends television. It becomes testimony. In Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, time doesn't heal wounds. Truth does. And the truth, once spoken, never returns empty. As the echoes of the DNA results fade, what remains is not silence, but a strange, heavy peace, the kind that follows storms. The people who entered her courtroom clinging to denial now leave with clarity. It's not the ending any of them imagined, but it's the only one grounded in reality. This final act of revelation isn't just about family, or even about love. It's about the relationship between law and justice, and how one cannot truly exist without the other. Law provides the structure, but justice gives it soul. And in Judge Lauren Lake's world, justice is never mechanical. It's moral. She doesn't just interpret statutes, she interprets people. Every DNA test is a gamble between hope and truth. And as this case closes, it's impossible to ignore the deeper message that science may determine paternity, but honesty determines peace. The DNA test exposed more than biology. It revealed motives, regrets, and the emotional fractures that legal systems so often have to mend. This story becomes a modern parable, one that could fit easily into a Celebrate Recovery testimony or the reflective tone of the Divorce Course podcast. It's a reminder that secrets, when buried, grow roots that choke love from the inside out. The mother in this case thought she could manage truth, control it, bend it to fit her narrative. But truth is not a tool, it's a force. It doesn't wait for permission, it arrives on its own time. Judge Lauren Lake knows this better than anyone. That's why her courtroom feels like a confessional booth for the modern age, where the concept of justice in jurisprudence meets the psychology of redemption. She sees that beneath every lie lies a deeper wound, and beneath every confession lies the possibility of healing. Her strength isn't just in enforcing law, but in seeing the fragile human heart behind each piece of evidence. And this case, with all its chaos and contradictions, becomes a profound lesson in accountability. It reminds the world why people should think before demanding a DNA test, because, as she often says, you can't unknow the truth. The phrase sounds simple, but it carries the weight of countless broken families, who've learned that lesson too late. In the days following the episode, social media becomes a forum of reflection. Viewers dissect every word, every reaction. On legal podcasts like the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, professionals discuss how Judge Lake's reasoning highlights the evolution of ethical lawyering, how empathy must now coexist with evidence. Listeners are reminded that family law isn't just about who wins or loses. It's about what the law teaches us about ourselves. On platforms like the Divorce Course podcast, psychologists and attorneys debate the emotional aftermath of such revelations. They discuss how the court becomes the final stage of truth-telling, the last refuge when love has failed. Some share personal stories, celebrate recovery testimonies of people who face similar truths, who once lived in deception until the DNA results shattered their illusions. They speak not with bitterness, but with gratitude, because, in their words, the truth hurt, but it healed. The case even sparks conversations about the adverse inference in evidence act, how concealing facts in family disputes often leads to self-destruction. What's hidden becomes poison, and what's confessed becomes medicine. Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom becomes the living embodiment of that principle. She doesn't allow half-truths to linger. Her rulings always return to one question: what's fair? In one of the episode's quietest moments, after the DNA results have been read and the arguments have settled, she looks at the mother and speaks softly but firmly. Her tone isn't harsh. It's surgical. You thought you were playing a game, she tells her. But this was never a game. This was life, and life has consequences. That single line reverberates beyond the courtroom, becoming a quote replayed in countless podcast discussions, shared on legal forums, and even cited in online courses about the concept of justice in jurisprudence. Because in that moment, Judge Lake redefines what justice means in the age of evidence. It's not revenge, it's revelation. Justice, she implies, is not about punishing the liar, it's about liberating the truth. And liberation, though painful, is the foundation of healing. For the man proven to be the biological father, the moment is bittersweet. He celebrates the truth but carries the knowledge that love will not come easily. DNA has given him rights but not relationships. Judge Lake reminds him gently that child support is not just financial, it's emotional.